You're special to God. Do you long to be loved? He loves you more than you could imagine. I mean, my goodness. God's thoughts about you outnumber the sands of the seashore. How do you get that blessing? By grace, not by earning. Earning was Jacob's way in his early life, and it ends only in disaster. God's blessing only comes by grace. He gives it as a gift of grace.
Every decision we make, every choice we make is actually a value statement. And the value that you assign something determines the price that you are willing to pay for it. That price might be financial, or that price might be paid for in time. That cost for that thing that you value might be paid for in sacrifice. Or maybe for some of you, some of the choices you've made have been paid for in regret. Every choice we make is a value statement. And over time, our accumulation of choices reveal what we truly value.
You might be a follower of Jesus, been following him for years, or you may be here with us today and you wouldn't call yourself a follower of Jesus. I just want you to know that a part of what it means to be human, a part of what it means to be made in the image of God is this restlessness, this discontent, this dissatisfaction with the stuff of this life.
Do not read the Bible like a narcissist. Read it like a worshiper, okay? And yet, hear this, and yet. Hebrews 11:30 does point to this situation as an example of faith that we should emulate. The fact that Jesus is the truer and better Joshua might be the main point of the Jericho story, but it's not the only point. There are things about Joshua's faith that the writer of Hebrews thinks we ought to emulate. So let me give you 4 basics of the faith that we see tucked into the 16 words of the story that got recorded in verse 30 that we ought to emulate. Let's call them the Jericho rules. Here is rule number one. The Christian life is not something we do, or it is something we do with God, not something that we do for him. This has been a major thing that I've been emphasizing all year because I've been relearning it myself. Christianity is not you for God, it's Christ in and through you. But see, that changes the equation. Because the question is not, what must I do to get God on my side? How do I procure God's blessing? No, the question is, as Joshua shows us, what does God want me to do and how do I join him in what he is doing?
The Lord was with Joseph. See, what a fascinating phrase that the author keeps using. See, at least to me, as I read this, from my Western worldview, this phrase seems so incompatible with Joseph's circumstances. See, I think it's largely because we have so misunderstood what God's nearness is supposed to look like. Like we, especially in the Western church, man, we think that the Lord is with us means that we always get the perfect job, we're always gonna be in the perfect relationship, we're always gonna get accepted to the right school, we're gonna be accepted by the right crowd, the cancer screening is always gonna be clear, the finances are always gonna be in the black. Yet listen, so often the Bible presents the nearness of God as something we find so much more palpable in the valleys than we do on the mountaintops.
You know, it's striking to me that no mention is ever made in the genealogy of the great esteemed matriarchs of the Old Testament. There's no mention of Sarah or Rebecca or Rachel. Instead, all we get listed in Jesus' genealogy are notorious sinners or great sufferers. Why record only Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba? I think it was to answer this question for you once and for all. Have you ever felt like you're damaged goods? Have you ever felt like you're beyond redemption? Have you ever felt like you're not good enough or capable enough or clean enough to be saved, that you're just not the Jesus type? Rahab's story shows you that's not true. It doesn't matter how much dirt and trash is in your past. If you will let the grace of God into your life, he will make you a better person than you ever thought possible, and he will change the entire trajectory of your family in ways beyond what you ever dared hope. He takes prostitutes, sex abuse victims, and forgotten refugees, and he turns them into his family. Martin Luther wrote it this way: it is though God intended through that genealogy to say, oh, Christ is the kind of person who's not only not ashamed of sinners, he even puts them in his family tree.